Are you having a unit on critical thinking and logic, and probably you are worried on how you are going to perform the task or answer questions? You are at the right place whereby we are going to synthesize the information, analyze the information, and all what you are required when you're answering critical thinking and logic questions. Have you come also across the following kind of questions about syllogism? For example, where you are asked to construct syllogism of the modes and figures such as E, I, O, A, I, A, E, among others, or statements or propositions that are asking about the truth value. For example, you are given a statement like some dinners are thieves being false, and then you are told to determine the truth value of other statements such as all sinners are thieves, no sinners are thieves, or you are given other contradicting propositions in critical thinking and logic that you are supposed to give their truth value. All these questions about syllogism and critical thinking questions on proposition are based on traditional square of opposition, which we are going to look at in brief. But before that, it is important to look at the basic terms that are in critical thinking and logic unit that will form the basis of our analysis. One of the main things that we will be mentioning is about arguments. And unlike other arguments that we hold casually in day-to-day lives, in critical thinking we have certain forms of arguments that are in standard form, and they refer to set of propositions in which a claim, which is the truth of one proposition, is claimed or is inferred. So in these arguments that we are going to form, they are based on propositions or statements that we are going to analyze. And also there are statements or propositions that will have truth value, where the truth value is the quality of claim to be either true or false. And we denote them with T for truth and F for false. The term proposition can be defined as a statement that has truth value, or a statement or a sentence that have got a truth value. Some sentences that do not qualify to be propositions are like questions. When you have ask a question, it doesn't have that truth value in it. Also, sentences that have got exclamations or commands. Other basic terms includes premise, whereby a premise is an assumption or a starting point in an argument from which other statements or conclusions are logically derived. So when that proposition occurs in an argument, they become premises, which also they are also the same term, but now when they are formed logically in an argument, they become or they are termed as premises. So a premise is an assumption or a starting point in which an argument you want to make is going to give a final conclusion. Like now, when you say all humans are mortal, in this case, that's a premise, which is also a proposition because they may be having, it may be true or false, and last have got a truth value. Also, we are going to look at a term like a subject, whereby this is the main person or an object that a premise or conclusion is talking about. You are going to realize that when you are talking about the propositions, there are some parts that we are going to discuss that forms up or makes up a proposition. And one of them is the subject and also a predicate term. Predicate term, which is denoted with the P, is the part of the statement that usually in a premise or a conclusion that tells us something about the subject. It is denoted with the P, and it makes a claim about the subject in a premise or a conclusion. For example, when you say all humans breathe in, what that human is doing about the breathing in becomes the predicate term. Also, in all arguments, there is a conclusion, which is the final inference or judgment that an argument aims to establish. It represents the logical endpoint and derived from and supported by the given premises in an argument. For example, if we had an argument like all humans are mortal, we look at a person like Socrates is a human, and finally we can make a conclusion such as therefore Socrates is immortal, because if he was a human in our first premise, in our second premise, and he is mortal, or the all human are mortal, therefore we can make a conclusion that Socrates is mortal. And then we have a claim. A claim is a declarative statement that can be evaluated as either true or false. Before you form the propositions or premises, the claim or a statement that you'll be having that will now be analyzed as having truth value is referred to a claim. So it's just a declarative statement that can be evaluated as either true or false. One thing you're going to notice that the term premise, a claim, and a proposition, they are usually interrelated depending on where they are used in an argument. There is also another important thing that you should understand about the difference between the deductive and the inductive argument. The deductive argument, it refers to an argument where the conclusion is logically follows from the premise with certainty. What we mean here is that the conclusion is true because the premises are the ones that give or gives us the argument that we cannot deny at the end. For example, if we say all humans are mortal, Socrates is a human, therefore we cannot counter-argue that Socrates is not mortal. Also, we can have other arguments. For example, all Africans are black, and then you can talk of one man who is being black, who is being an African, and finally you cannot counter-argue that that person is not black, because we are not deriving the conclusion from other sources, but we are just deriving our conclusion or inferring our conclusion from the arguments that we have given in our premises. So a deductive argument conclusion logically follows from the premise with certainty. The word certainty here is very important. It refers to the truth nature of a deductive argument conclusion that you cannot deny. The conclusion is derived with certainty. On the other hand, the inductive arguments, they are arguments where the premises provide a probable support for the conclusion. Here, we can also say that conclusions are inferred with probability and not with certainty. If the premises are true, the conclusion is also not guaranteed, and therefore you cannot give a specific inference in the conclusion, but you give a conclusion in probability. For example, in an argument like the one here in an example, we can say, whenever it rains, it gets cold. Right now it is raining. Probably it will be cold in our conclusion. Here we have given our conclusion with probability because we are not certain whether it is a must that when it rains it gets cold, because sometimes it even rains when it is sunny. And that is why we have said that inductive arguments, it is where the premises provide a conclusion that is derived with some probability. Okay, that is now the difference between the inductive and deductive arguments. Now let us look at some of the arguments and the parts that makes us an argument, including the premises, the claims that we are going to be making, and the conclusions that we are going to be deriving from our propositions. In an argument, like now the example that we have here, all humans are mortal, Jeff is a human. Conclusion of Jeff is motto. We are having a term here called a major premise. We are going to look at what are major premises later on. We are also going to look at what's a minor premise and a conclusion. But before that, let us look at what is a claim, what is a proposition in depth, so that when you will be forming them, you will not be having a challenge. When we look at this proposition, all humans are mortal. Human is the subject. Mortal is the predicate term. Subject here means it is the one or the object or the thing or the person who is being referred to, and the action becomes the predicate term. In the second premise, Jeff is a human. Jeff is the subject and the predicate is human. In the conclusion, the subject is Jeff and the predicate term is mortal. So all the claims or propositions or the premises that you are going to form, they are supposed to have a subject and a predicate term. As we had said earlier that critical thinking and logic arguments are not the common one that we hold in day-to-day conversations. They have certain features. Number one, that they have special indicators in their conclusion. Like now in the deductive argument, we say that the conclusion is derived with certainty. Like now the words definitely, absolutely, necessarily are used in the conclusion. Like now, when we have a premise 1, all humans need water to survive. John is a human, and John here is a human now, and all humans need water. So the conclusion that we can infer at the deductive argument is that therefore John definitely needs water to survive. Here we have arrived at a conclusion with the certainty that we cannot deny John will require water to survive, because earlier we had said all humans need water and John is a human. So whenever you are forming arguments or deductive arguments, there is special indicators in the conclusion are the ones that shows certainty. On the other hand, in inductive argument, we said conclusion is arrived with some probability, but not with surety. For example, words such as probably, likely, unlikely, or possibly are used as special indicators in the conclusion. For example, when we say the last 4 times it rained, there were traffic jams on the highway, then we say it is raining today, therefore there is possibility there will be a traffic jam today. We have arrived with some probability in our conclusion because this person arguing that the last 4 times it rained there was a traffic jam, and right now it is raining. We are not sure whether there will be a traffic jam today, and that's why we have a special indicator here of possibly, or showing probability but not certainty that there will be a traffic jam, because the last 4 times it rained there was a traffic jam, and right now it is raining. So this special indicator shows that these are critical thinking and logic arguments, and the conclusion is having a special indicator to show whether it is with certainty or with probability. The second feature of an argument in critical thinking and logic is that there is a connection or a logical link between the premise or premises and the conclusion that is strong and convincing. What do we mean here? There is a strength of the inferential between the premise and the conclusion. For example, when we say all Kenyans are athletes, Tom is a Kenyan, the conclusion that we are going to have here is that therefore Tom is an athlete, because we must get our conclusion from the premises that we had given. Therefore, in this argument, there is a logical proof from the premise to the conclusion. And the only thing that here we can only add is that certainty, because if all Kenyans are athletes and Tom is a Kenyan, therefore definitely Tom is an athlete. Remember, the argument here is not from what within or coming up with your own argument or your own conclusions, we are getting conclusion from the premises that we give. Like now, you cannot come here and deny that Tom is an athletee because not all Kenyans are ideally athletes, but we are getting our conclusion from the premises that are here. And that is why we say there is a logical flow from the premise to the conclusion so that you can make an inference. So you should note that the argument that we are making here are not the normal argument of having surety or the truth of nature, but it's a conclusion that we are making from the given premises so that we come up with a conclusion that is logical. So here in the critical thinking and logic argument, the premises are the ones that gives us a conclusion, not what we have in our mind or ideas that we experience in our day-to-day lives. So make sure the argument that you are making will be following or having a link or a logical link from the premises up to the conclusion. Like now, a person cannot come and say all Kenyans are athletes, Tom is an American, and then you say therefore Tom definitely is an athlete. That will be wrong because there is no connection between a Kenyan athlete and American. But here, because the conclusion is derived from the premises, we say this is a logical argument in critical thinking and logic. Okay, number three, the third feature of an argument in critical thinking is that the subject of the first premise, that is the main person or idea or the thing that the premise is talking about, is free included or excluded in the object or the predicate term of conclusion. For example, in the deductive argument below, no insect are mammals. A grasshopper is an insect, therefore a grasshopper is not a mammal. You're going to realize that the insect, which is the object of the first premise, is fully excluded from the predicate of the conclusion, and the word mammal has replaced the predicate of the conclusion. This is also another feature whereby the main argument or the main idea or the main person being argued about is either included or excluded in the predicate term of the conclusion. Okay, let us now look at the different types of propositions. Let us look at the different types of propositions that you can form when you are making an argument. The two main types of propositions are compound propositions and simple proposition. Although we are not going to dwell much on compound propositions, they refer to statements formed by combining two or more simple propositions using logical connectiveness. The different types of compound propositions, although we are not going to dwell much on them, includes the hypothetical propositions. They take a form of if S, then P. For example, when you say if it is sunny, then it is wet. S here, remember, it refers to the subject, and P refers to the predicate. So if it is sunny, then it is wet. This also is an example of hypothetical proposition in other compound propositions. We also have disjunctive propositions, which takes a form of either S or P. For example, when you say he is either bright or foolish, either S or P, where S is bright or the subject is bright, foolish is the predicate. We also have conjunctive propositions, which is also similar to conjunction in English, which takes a form of both S and P. For example, when you say he is both royal and bright, here S the subject is royal and predicate is bright. Another or the fourth is the biconditional proposition, which takes a form of S and only if P, or form of subject and only if the predicate. So, for example, when you say you will be rich if and only you work hard, is an example of a biconditional proposition, which are examples of compound propositions. Remember the second category of proposition that we mentioned under the types is the simple or the categorical proposition. Okay, let us now look at the simple propositions, which are also called the standard propositions, which is the second category of proposition. Remember the previous one was compound proposition. The simple proposition is also referred to as the standard proposition, also the categorical proposition. And these propositions, they affirm the subject class is either partially or fully included or excluded from the predicate class. Those terms might sound difficult, but all what they mean is that the subject is either included in the predicate or not included or partially included or fully excluded. For example, when we say all entrepreneurs have savings, what we mean here that we have not left any entrepreneur behind when it comes to saving. All of them have been included in the predicate of saving. Another person may come and argue that no entrepreneur have savings. Here we have excluded all the entrepreneurs when it comes to savings. Another person may come and say some entrepreneurs have savings. Here we have partially included some entrepreneurs when it comes to saving. So we are going to note that when it comes to this kind of argument, we are either agreeing or we are fully including the subject in the predicate, or we are partially including them, or we are partially excluding them in the predicate. And that is all about how you form simple or standard propositions, which are very important in this area when it comes to critical thinking and logic, and how we are going to form arguments. So remember, a simple proposition or a standard proposition will either include or exclude or partially include the subject in its predicate. And next, let us look at the parts of a standard simple categorical proposition. And it contains the following parts. Number one is a quantifier, a subject term, a copula, and a predicate term. For example, when we say all teachers are investors, all here is now the quantifier. It is giving us specification of how much the subject is included, which is all of them. No teacher is left behind. We have the subject matter or the subject term, which is the term used to represent the subject. Like now here we are talking about the teachers as the main people in our proposition. You also have a copula, which is the form of the verb to be, which is are. You can also have is, among others, as they appear in English, but here they are just given a term copula when it comes to critical thinking and logic. Then we have the predicate term. This is the term that represents the predicate class or the actions that the subject are proposed to be doing. Like now here the teachers are proposed to be being investors, as the thus investor becomes the predicate of the subject here, or in our argument here or proposition when we say all teachers are investors. So remember the four main parts of a standard simple categorical proposition. And remember the word standard, something that is standardized. They must have a quantifier, a subject, copula, and a predicate. Just as how we measure distance in kilometers, meters, or other SI units, when it comes to formation of propositions, there are several forms that propositions or premises can take in an argument. And when it comes to standard categorical proposition, they can only take four forms, which are denoted with alphabet letters A, E, I, and O. A is used to represent propositions or premises that takes a form of or S are P, where S are subject and P are predicate. It shows they are universal affirmative. They are agreeing all that all subjects are in predicate. For example, when you say all mammals breathe in oxygen, you have not left behind any mammal when it comes to breathing in oxygen. So you have universally agreed or affirmed that all of them. So all SRP refers to all subjects are in predicate. So all the propositions that takes those forms are labeled as A. Second one are E is E. These are propositions or premises that takes a form of no subject or predicate or no SRP, which refers to universal negative. Universal refers to all of them, and you are negative, you are rejecting all of them. For example, when you say no birds are birds, you have not left any birds and you are counter-arguing that they are birds. So no birds are birds takes a form of no SRP, where S is the bird and P is the birds, and they are called universal negative. It is the opposite of A, which is universal affirmative or you are agreeing or. Thirdly, we have I, we take a form of some SRP. This is a particular affirmative argument. Particular means a certain number, you are agreeing that certain number of subjects are in the predicate, but not all of them. For example, when you say some fruits are vegetables, it means not all fruits are vegetables, but a certain percentage or a certain number of fruits are vegetables. So propositions or premises that takes form of some SRP or some subject RP are grouped as I when it comes to four forms of standard categorical propositions. Lastly, it is the propositions or premises that takes a form of some S are not P, and this is particular negative. Like how we have argued that some S are P, so it also means that some S are not P. And this one takes a form of O. And these arguments or propositions, they are negative, but for a particular number. For example, when you say some roses are not flowers, it means it can mean that some roses are flowers, yet others are not flowers. So or propositions or premises that take the form of some S are not P or some subject are not in predicate are grouped as O. Since we are going to refer to the four forms of standard categorical proposition, let us look at the summary table so that we can fully be able to categorize propositions, as we will be using this table in various ways. For example, in syllogism, and also when it comes to traditional square of opposition, which we are going to learn later in the lesson. We have said whenever you see letter A, they are all the propositions that take a form of or SRP or universal affirmative. For example, all investors are savers, all farmers are savers, all students are hardworking, among others. Letter E, we have said there are propositions that take a form of no SRP or negative, and they are universal negative. For example, when we say no investors are savers, here we had said or, in A we had said or, now it is no, just as there is here no SRP. And then I, we have said they are the ones that take a form of some SRP, that is being particular affirmative, that some of them, investors now as the S and savers being the P. Some investors are savers, some students are hardworking, among others. When we have O, they are the ones that take a form of some S are not P, that is particular negative. For example, when we say some investors are not savers, It means not all of them are savers, and not all of them are not savers. So those are the proposition that takes the form of O. So it is important you note and you remember this table, because for example, when you see syllogism where you are given A, E, I, you are supposed to know that the first one needs you to give an example of a proposition or a premise where you are agreeing or universal affirmative. E is where we get the universal negative, and I, that is where we get the particular affirmative, and O, that is where we get a particular negative premise or a statement. So this table is very important, and we will be referring to this table often as we continue the lesson. Let us now look at the explanation. In case you are told to explain about the four standard categorical propositions, how will you be explaining them? This is very important also. Let's start. The standard categorical propositions, which are also denoted as SCP, you are going to note that A and E are called universal as they make reference to all members. A, remember we said all SRP, and E is the one that are no SRP. So they are called universal as they make reference to all its members in the subject. They are either included or not included in the predicate. To the standard categorical proposition, I and O are called particular as they make reference to some of its members of its subject class, whether they are included or not included in the predicate class. So propositions that affirm inclusion of its members either partially or fully into the predicate class are called affirmative. Like A is universal affirmative and I is particular affirmative. The ones that either partially or fully agree inclusion. Standard categorical proposition A, or the ones that take form of A, is called universal affirmative as it affirms inclusion of its subject fully into the predicate class. So A, that's why it's called universal affirmative. That's why I said it agrees or that they are fully included in the predicate class. Like now when you say all roses are flowers. Standard categorical proposition I is called particular affirmative as it affirms partial or just a small number are included in the subject as a subject into the predicate class. On the other hand, the standard categorical propositions that are negative, those are two, that is E and O. They assert the exclusion of the subject in the predicate class fully or partially. For example, here we said no SRP, so it has been fully excluded. The subject is fully excluded in the predicate class, where O, which is some S are not P, it asserts that some predicates are not included in the some subjects are not included in the predicate class. So standard categorical proposition E asserts free exclusion of subject in the predicate class. That is why they are referred to as universal negative. For example, when you say no bats are birds. Standard categorical proposition O asserts partial exclusion of the subject in the predicate class. For example, when you say some runners are not hardworking, that is particular negative. A particular number of some are not in the predicate class. We have come to the end of this session, and in our next session, because of time, we are going to look at how we are going to construct syllogism of the following modes and figures. We look at what is syllogism, what is a mood in syllogism, and which are figures in syllogism. Remember, this is where you get your marks when you're forming the propositions, making argument, explaining what they mean, among others. Like now, just to mention, let's take at B. It is having AAA, which are standard categorical forms of or SRP, or SRP, or SRP. E takes a form of no SRP, I, and O. All of them now, they have been combined so that you can make argument. We are going to run this and much more in an interactive session in the next video. So keep in touch, like and follow this YouTube channel, and we appreciate for your support.